tonight. This is Wednesday Night Sessions. I am your host, Mitch Nobis, as usual, and welcome back to, I believe we're in season 5 at this point. Someplace out there, I put a little preamble explaining that this is the season I'm recording in isolation. So I apologize for any background noise. I got an air purifier going here, the window's wide open, trying to blow my pandemic breath out and keep the rest of the family healthy. So I apologize if there's any audio problems or anything like that. But I am thrilled you're all joining us tonight. With us is novelist Nick Arvin, who, as he was just telling me before we clicked record, is a native Michigander, but in Colorado now, I believe, if I'm remembering from Twitter. Also a great Twitter follow for those of you who are on social media. And the author of one of my favorite novels of recent years, Mad Boy. So I'm just going to toss it over to Nick to let him introduce himself, give us a reading, and then like usual, we'll bounce back with a couple of questions at the end. Take it away, Nick.
All right. Thank you, Mitch. Appreciate it. I am Nick Arvin. I'm the author of 3 novels and a book of short stories. I do live in Colorado and Denver. In my day job, I'm an engineer. For this event, I'm going to read just from the beginning of my most recent novel, the one that Mitch mentioned, which is called Mad Boy. And it is about a boy during the War of 1812. He's in the Chesapeake Bay area. And I'm just going to read from the beginning of the book, so you don't really need to know any more than that. The boy's name is Henry Phipps, and actually the book, I'm excited. I'm interrupting myself. I'm excited. One, the book has a map. I've always wanted to have a book with a map. And I'm also excited the book has a subtitle. I think novels with subtitles are fun. And the subtitle of this is Mad Boy. Mad Boy is a title, subtitle, An Account of Henry Phipps in the War of 1812. Henry Phipps runs through the shadows under great trees. He's angry. Someone has lied. The slave Radnor has lied to Henry, or someone has lied to Radnor. Some liar has lied to someone a terrible lie. He runs through wet heat and spongy mud, through clouds of gnats and sprays of pale flowers. A small boy, lean like a figure cut from a length of wood too thin for the intended shape. He wears a shirt that's scarcely more than sacking with buttons, trousers patched in several places and cinched by a rope belt, boots with a hole in one toe, and no hat. When a bramble scratches his leg, he stops to yell at the plant and kick it. Then he runs on. Old Forest still covers much of the land between the Chesapeake and the Potomac, and America has been at war with Britain for 2 of Henry's 10 years, mostly losing. From ahead drifts the sound of an English voice, which Henry would notice if it were not for the noise of his own breath, rushing blood and fury. Why would Radnor lie? Who would lie to Radnor? Henry cannot fathom. He had jumped to his feet and raced away before Radnor finished explaining. Henry wants to talk to Mother. Mother will know what to do. Henry is so outraged and wrathful that he gives only contempt to the idea that what Radnor said might be true, that Henry's brother, Franklin, is dead. He runs under hickories and sycamores, not slowing as the land slopes upward, trying to go yet faster against the ache in his legs. He careens into a clearing, stumbles, and stops. Before him is a round-eyed, jug-eared man holding a musket and wearing a brass-buttoned wool jacket, well-worn, dirty, ruddy pink. Behind this man, scattered about the open meadow, are some 3 dozen soldiers in similar coats, like a flight of faded cardinals. They are, of course, redcoats. A couple of months ago, Henry's father was sent to the debtor's prison in Baltimore. But previous to this setback, father had often traveled to Washington, Alexandria, Annapolis, and Baltimore, where he drank whiskey and played faro. He always returned poorer, but bearing the latest news, and for 2 years the news has been of redcoat raids up and down the Chesapeake, capturing food and goods, destroying farms, taking away slaves. The jug-eared redcoat, who looks not yet 18, yelps, fumbles for the musket on his shoulder, catches a heel, and falls on the seat of his patched trousers. The other redcoats turn and stare. The humid air lies quiet. The ironwork of the British muskets shines like Spanish dollars. The stocks are painted vermilion. Among the British, surprising Henry amid his surprise, are a few black-skinned soldiers. The redcoats span a long, narrow meadow cut across by a zigzag fence. Out of sight, behind the trees, is a house, and Henry knows that the family there are little. The Jeffrey family, they keep several cows, pigs, goats, and an uncommon number of turkeys, which they chase across their tobacco field to peck the hornworms. One of the redcoats has straddled a she-goat and slashed her throat. As he stares at Henry, the throat drizzles, and the goat appears both sleepy-eyed and irate. Some 20 yards behind the jug-eared soldier, who still sits in the grass, stands a redcoat with a gold epaulet, a brass-tipped black leather scabbard, and a jacket that is redder than the others. In each hand, he grips a headless chicken. "Hello there, boy," he calls. "Hold up." He looks at the chickens as if unsure whether to drop them or throw them or some other course of action. Henry, in his surprise, laughs. Then he turns, jumps for the bushes, and tumbles downhill. He ends up with his face in branches and dirt. He proceeds sideways through scratching brambles, hoping the redcoats will assume he would continue straight down. He wriggles into a hollow beneath an evergreen and lies panting and trying to swallow his panting. Behind him, the redcoats yell insults at one another. Henry hears the jug-eared soldier call, "Oh, close your hole, egg sucker." He plods loudly into the brush and trees. "Why run away, boy?" he calls. "Because you're a spy? A stupid one? Come out, stupid spy. Come out so I can kill you." Henry watches him aim his musket to the left, then the right, then sigh, turn, and amble away. Henry shifts a branch to see the others. It's exciting. Father said that the British would never come this far inland, but for father to be proven wrong is a circumstance with many precedents. The British have a trio of donkey carts loaded with cornmeal, tobacco, dead livestock, and whiskey. The redcoats smash up the rails of a fence to make a path for the carts, and they move on in the direction of Mr. Southers' house. A black soldier leads the way. Henry wonders idly how long it will take for the Jeffreys' livestock to find the hole in the fence and wander off. He trails behind the redcoats for a half mile, then turns toward the cabin and mother, thinking again of what Radnor said. Immediately he's angry, fears he may weep, and runs. I'll stop there.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. Whoops, let me get there. I'm back on the screen now. Thank you for that reading. And I don't want to give away too much for folks who are going to read it. And I don't think it is, because this happens very soon in the book. But there's an incident with livestock that seems outlandish. But I remember you posting something on Twitter not all that long ago that this was actually based on fact, that a cow crashes through the ceiling and
yes,
mayhem.
Yeah. Henry lives in a house that's backed up into a hillside. So the hill forms the back wall of the house, and it's possible to wander up the hill and onto the roof of the house. And in that section, it mentioned that there's a hole in the fence and the livestock can wander around. So there's a cow that gets up on the roof and crashes through while Henry and his mother are inside. And that was based on an incident that I read about, a modern incident. Something similar happened in, I think it was Peru several years ago. It's like you said, I don't think it's giving away too much. The cow lands on Henry's mother, and at the time when I was writing it, I was trying to come up with I think I had the mother getting kicked by a cow or a mule or something, and that just seemed kind of cliche, and I was looking for something more interesting. So the cow came through the roof, and I think it gives a sense early on of the kind of dark humor that is at play in this book.
Well, that's why I was just overjoyed and flabbergasted when I found out that it actually happened, because your book has so much marvelous, dry, dark humor in it that I just assumed this was kind of a purposefully over the top plot point, way to get things into action. Like, okay, so we get a Henry, living in the hillside, and then cow crashes through the roof and lands on mom. Like, I just assumed this was intended to be an over the top, like I said, outlandish way to kick things off. And then no, like, it's kind of a classic, like, life is stranger than fiction. Like, this actually happened. And is where the kind of the nugget, the idea for the story even started in the first place, which I don't know what I was thinking, assuming that fiction could be stranger than life. I know better. But here we are. So I thought that was fantastic. I often like to ask kind of some process questions. A lot of people who watch this show are other writers or just art supporters who are kind of interested in the behind the scenes stuff a little bit. And we have another guest on this season who's a poet who works in writing, but in a hospital environment. So he's not in education like so many writers are. So I want to kind of pitch the same question to you, because you're in engineering. So how do you find your work and writing life? Do they inform each other? Do they overlap? Is it beneficial to have kind of silos, so to speak, for your different parts of life? Or is that sometimes frustrating? Just kind of talk to us about that. Like, how do you keep engineering and writing separate?
Yeah, I mean, all those things are true. Well, I guess to back up, I just to give a little bit of an origin story. I grew up in Clio, Michigan, and I was the kind of kid that was good at math and science. I was a big reader. I read pretty much everything I could get my hands on, and I started doing some fiction writing in high school, and I really loved it. And it felt like something that I wanted to pursue. But like I said, I was good at math and science, and I was just in a place where it seemed like if you were good at that, you went into engineering. So I went into college, went to the University of Michigan, entered the engineering school there. And then I started thinking really hard about switching to an English major. And ended up not doing so because it seemed to me that what I was really interested in was writing fiction. And I wasn't sure that an English major was actually going to help me very much. I knew that was a path that's difficult to make a living on. And I figured, I can make a living engineering and write on the side a lot more easily than, because I was interested in engineering too. It would be pretty hard to get an English major and then do some engineering on the side.
Impossible even.
Yeah. So I've kind of ever since then had these two tracks going on in my life. And sometimes putting a pause on the engineering to when I have the opportunity to focus on the writing. I did an MFA at the University of Iowa for a couple of years and had a grant to take a year off. But mostly have kept up with engineering. For the past 15 years, I've worked at a company that does process engineering. We design everything from power plants to biogas, cow manure based facilities, all kinds of stuff. And for whatever reason, I've kind of settled in my writing into working historical fiction in my novels. I enjoy doing the research, and I enjoy kind of trying to figure out what life was like. But then I write short stories that are often come out of my engineering life and are contemporary settings with characters in technical careers. So it is nice, as you kind of mentioned, the two tasks are different enough that I can end my engineering day and then sit down to write. And it feels like I'm now doing something different that I enjoy. My engineering actually involves quite a bit of writing, which is something everybody should emphasize to anybody who's thinking about going into engineering. But it's a very different kind of writing, and so it's that transition always feels good. And I do think there's a little bit of the mentality of engineering that comes into play for me when I'm writing. A lot of what I'm engineering these days are these kind of big systems of equipment, and trying to make a process work well. And there's something similar there to writing, and just kind of how a story has all these pieces that you're trying to mesh together into a system that works well. So there are times when that mental process of like trying to balance all these different elements, especially in a novel. It's like a mobile that's got all these pieces, and you tweak one thing, you have to adjust everything else. And both in the engineering and the writing, there's a little bit of that. And it's been a good. It's an unusual path. I don't know that I've really met any other engineer literary writers, but there are a couple out there who started out in engineering. George Saunders was an engineer, and Stuart Ornan, who's a writer I admire, was also an engineer. But it's been a good if unusual path for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's so much there you said that I hadn't really thought of before, but it makes perfect sense. Like working on big systems, and then I think about Mad Boy, which is very like Odyssean hero's journey, like lots of moving parts that intersect, and like and I'm also from a farm, so I'm fully aware of the trying to recapture cow manure energy engineering movement as well. Like someday I'll get out to Colorado and we'll have a beer, and I want to actually hear about that. You probably met 3 people in your whole life who want to hear more about the capturing cow shit.
Yes, please come.
I'm one of them. So yeah, there's a million things that I could comment on. I also want to piggyback on the engineering thing. Of course, I do live in Metro Detroit. Most of our viewers are in Metro Detroit, so we all know engineers. And we have these great neighbors. Everybody has neighbors who are engineers here, right? And the one who lives right there, and I always talk about books. He's a big Cormac McCarthy fan, and he's in engineering. It's like people think these have to be totally divergent paths, and not at all. Like you said, you'd be surprised how much a math-based job requires high-level literacy skills. I mean, I've taught high school for decades, and I've told thousands of students that no matter what you're going into, whenever I'm teaching high school English, I say whatever you're going into, the better you can read and write, the better you're going to be at whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah. Oh, it's absolutely true. It's really in my work, it's really limiting if you don't have the ability to.
I tell them, I mean, again, in Metro Detroit, everybody thinks engineering, and I try to tell them, you will get the promotions if you're the reading and writing engineer, and the other guys won't. Like, it's going to open up so many doors. But we're readers and writers. We could sit here and praise reading and writing, all day long. Nick, the second question in this show is usually a kind of silly one, or not necessarily silly, just not about writing. And we also love to get Michigan expatriates on the show. So you were one of the first people I thought of for season 5, because I knew you were originally from Michigan. So you haven't been here in a while. Many of your viewers are from here. So tell us, if you could come back to Michigan right now, what would be like the first thing on your list? Like, what do you miss? What would you want to get to see, do, revisit, you name it?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to mind, and this actually does connect to the book, is Mackinac Island. I love Mackinac Island. It's always felt a little magical to me. And because the fort there was involved in the War of 1812, I think the War of 1812, so, this book is set during the War of 1812. I come across people who were like, who was in that war, like they don't know anything about it. But it was always kind of I was always very aware of it as a kid because we would go to Mackinac Island, and I loved the fort and the cannons and the musket demonstrations and all that stuff. So I had the opportunity. I have a son who's 15 now, but probably like 8 or 9 years ago, I took him to Michigan, and we went to. I'd actually used. So he was a reluctant kid to learn how to ride a bike. For whatever reason, he just kind of every once in a while he'll get stubborn about something, and that was something he decided to be stubborn about. He didn't want to learn how to ride a bike. And so I told him, if you'll learn how to ride a bike, we'll go to Michigan, we'll go to Mackinac Island, and you can ride all the way around the island. Because I remember that was another thing when I was a kid. It was cool to me that you could ride that circuit in 3 hours or whatever it is. And that was motivating for him. So we went up there and we rode around. We were at first people out in the morning, and it was foggy and just the lake rattling around in the stones. It was as magical as I remembered. It was really great.
That's perfect. Those moments where you can actually capture part of your own childhood for your kids they're one in a million. And yeah, I mean, magical is kind of the only way to capture that, to describe that, right? Like when it actually happens the way you as a parent want it to happen.
Yeah.
It never happens. So
it's so rare that it does work out.
No magic is involved when it happens. Awesome. All right. Well, that's the show, Nick. Thank you very much for joining us. It has been a pleasure chatting with you. And I'm really happy you took time out of your day to do this. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Mitch.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, regular viewers, we'll see you next time. We'll be back usually next week. We usually release a new episode every Wednesday night. So we'll see you next time. Take care.